Rồi tiếp theo của buổi chương trình, xin mời diễn giả Shan Han là Portfolio Manager tại Animoca Brands lên sân khấu để chia sẻ về chủ đề 3,000 tỷ đô tài chính giáo dục có thể lên on-chain. Thank you to speaker and moderator of various panel. Next, please welcome Shan Han, Portfolio Manager at Animoca Brands, to present on 3 trillion in education financing can go on-chain.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming out here. Wonderful location, really honored to be invited to speak here today. My name is Shan. I'm a portfolio manager at Animoca Brands. What I'd like to talk a bit about today is a few things. The first is there's been a lot of discussion today about real-world adoption, right? Real-world use cases. And I'd just like to explain a bit about what Animoca Brands does and show that we do really actually care a lot about this institutional adoption and that it's one of the driving factors around what we do. Secondly, I'd like to talk through one of the key use cases that we're actually pushing through one of our portfolio projects called Open Campus, which is actually tokenizing the $3.7 trillion student loan industry, and just explain a bit about how we see this contributing to both the broader crypto ecosystem as well as the Ethereum ecosystem itself. So first, a bit about Animoca Brands. A lot of you may know us as a Web3 gaming company, which we once were quite a few years ago now, but we've since expanded quite a bit, right? So we do a few things. We, of course, invest in businesses. We advise businesses through a digital asset advisory and market making arm. And we also incubate our own businesses, right? So these are kind of the core pillars around the things that we do at Animoca Brands. And we're now actually a very diversified company with a portfolio of about 580 companies in the ecosystem. And so one of the things that I just want to talk a bit about is the ethos around what we think about decentralization, right? I think we're all somewhat familiar with this read, write, own piece, but really for us, it's about digital property rights. Being able to own the data that we talked about in the previous panel, being able to own the money that you own as assets, as digital assets. And so when we look at the Web2 network effect, why is this an issue? It's because the network effects essentially get contained in the organizations, the centralized organizations that actually build up this data, right? For us, we believe that this is going to be completely changed with Web3. And that's why we have such a large portfolio as well, right? We already see these network effects that come from all of the different ecosystems that we are partnered with, that we invest in, and that we work with. And so this is roughly what we see as the value exchange in a token, right? Like, what does it mean to be a token? And for us, actually, a token is essentially ownership and participation in this network. Because if you think about it, in these traditional Web2 networks, who benefits? It's the centralized tech company, right? Instead, in Web3, we as participants can stake and own a piece of this by being a token holder. And that's why to us, this is just a really, really important thing. And why fundamentally, when we talk about institutional adoption of crypto, you also want to talk about the tokens as well, right? The two are not necessarily mutually exclusive. And so this is roughly how we see our value to the ecosystem and ourselves, right? Everyone's kind of got their own metric of what value they consider. You know, you think of someone like Stripe, they consider themselves growing the GDP of the internet. We see this as the total network value. So this is essentially the different market caps of the different projects that we're involved in, either directly on our own balance sheet or through JVs, subsidiaries, and partnerships. Which brings us to how do we see increasing this network effect in the education sector, right? Like I mentioned, I want to talk a bit about a real-world use case here. And actually, education financing is one of the most interesting things that I think is completely untapped, right? When we talk about real-world assets, a lot of people are talking about, of course, now hot things like tokenized stocks, tokenized real estate, that's been around for a long time. But there's this entire blue ocean of education assets that we don't see anybody else tackling. So we've actually doubled down on this. First, a chart that I think we're all very familiar with. We like to see this chart go up. The bigger it is, the bigger our bank account, and the happier we are as an economy. This is the size of the student loan industry. It's more than 10 times the size of what we have in the Ethereum community, or even the entire crypto market cap, right? It's about the same size. So really what we're looking to do here, and where we see this being really interesting, is what if we bring it on-chain, right? What if we bring this $3.8 trillion industry on-chain? Even 10% will double Ethereum's market cap. And the way we're doing it is through EDU Chain. So EDU Chain is at Open Campus. We have launched this layer 3 blockchain. It's a roll-up on Arbitrum. And this is how we actually see ourselves participating in the ecosystem, because fundamentally what we're trying to do here is drive capital formation for education financing, for student loans to happen on-chain. And the way we're doing it is through various projects, but the flagship project is called Pencil Finance. So Animoca Brands and the Open Campus Foundation, we've backed Pencil Finance with $10 million in financing, and we're looking to be tokenizing $100 million in student loans in the coming few months. But I want to talk about why this matters, right? Apart from, of course, increasing the network value of everything we do and everything that exists in the crypto world, why does this matter in the real world to people? There's a few headlines here where I think you by now may have seen. In the West, student loans are at risk, especially in the US, where it is now going to be something that a lot of people are going to be defaulting on. And what's crazy is in the US, student loans are one of the only type of debt that follow you out of bankruptcy. It's literally for life, right? So with all these people going to be defaulting, that's going to impact them. Because if they default, they're saddled with this debt, and they're not going to be able to continue to participate in financial markets, right? They're not going to be able to get a mortgage for a home. They're not going to be able to get a personal loan if they want to do something for themselves. It's an issue. But perhaps even more so, a bit closer to home for us here in Asia, is in at least developed markets, capital access exists. There are federal, state government programs that subsidize student loans and make it feasible for people to borrow. This doesn't exist in most of the world, right? And so as a result, what you end up with is either students cannot afford to get a high quality education, or they have to go to completely unlicensed, unregulated lenders. In the Philippines, for example, we know for a fact, because we've spoken to some of these students, that they are borrowing at over 100% APR. It's 100%. How are they ever supposed to be able to do anything with that, right? So when your choices are either pay 100% APR or don't get an education, that is a big problem to solve. And so really what I want to impress on you guys today here is we want to do real world impact with the things that we do here today. If you think this is an interesting mission, please do come out and reach out and speak to me. If you're doing something else, think a bit about what is the real world impact that you're generating from it. And we at Animoca Brands would love to support you. Thank you.
Cảm ơn Shan Han cho phần chia sẻ vừa rồi.